Okay, good morning, everybody. I have the pleasure of introducing Nick Guertin, sworn in as Director of Operational Test and Evaluation at the DoD level on December 20th, 2021, a presidential appointee confirmed by the United States Senate. He serves as the Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Defense on operational and live fire test and evaluation of Department of Defense weapons systems. Anybody who knows and has worked with DOT&E in the past, no groaning, no moaning. Let's give Nick a due welcome and give him a shot in the new position. He has extensive 4-decade combined military and civilian career in submarine operations, ship construction, maintenance, development and testing of weapons, sensors, combat management systems, including the improvement of systems engineering processes and defense acquisition processes. Most recently, he's performed applied research for government and academia in software, reliant and cyber physical systems at Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute. Over his career, he's led an organization transformation, improved competition, and increased application of modular open systems approaches, prototyping, and experimentation. He has also researched and published extensively on software reliant systems, testing, acquisition. He received a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Washington and an MBA from Bryant University. He's retired Naval Reserve Engineering Duty Officer, was Defense Acquisition Improvement Act Certified Program Manager and Engineer, and is also a licensed professional engineer. So please welcome Mr. Nick Guertin.
Thank you. So first of all, tough act to follow, and an apology for starting out with a heckle. So that's sure that'll come back to bite me. By the way, as a born and raised New Englander and former Newark guy, both Newark, Newport, and Keyport, I find myself amongst friends. Now, not as many friends as there were when the Admiral was talking. I don't know. It's getting too close to lunch, I guess. Anyway, but thanks, Don, for the kind introduction. I really appreciate it. We've known each other for many years, and it's been nice to work together both in the past and in the future. And thanks for Molly and SENEDIA, is that how you pronounce it? Pretty close. For setting up this conference and for inviting me, by the way. Any opportunity to come to Newport in the summer is a good one, and I greatly appreciate it. So we share that mission of warfighting and defending the nation. I'm a DoD guy, not a Navy guy, so not the sort of person you normally deal with, but I'm got a lot of Navy in me, so bear with that. But I do have a kind of diverse array of products that we keep an eye on through the lens of oversight, and it's an exciting position and interesting things that a lot of stuff I can't talk about. But what I'm also going to focus on here today is pulling through some of the things Admiral talked about earlier and having an introspective thought about the kinds of work we do, how it's evolving, and what we need to do differently in the future. I'm working from some notes here. I have a speechwriter now, which I've never had one of those before, and I haven't quite figured out exactly how to make very good use of it. But as mentioned, I have 2 direct reports, the Secretary of Defense, mostly through the Deputy Secretary, and directly to Congress, which freaks people out, right? Because my reports are independently provided to Congress, including our annual report. Good reading for those of you who need something to fall asleep by. But it's lots of different programs, and most of them are doing pretty well. But we call balls and strikes. In the places where they're not doing well, sometimes we give bad news to good people. But we're nothing personal about it, just business, which is kind of a different way of looking at this job for some people. So you can give me the moans and the groans, but know that the leadership that I have on my team, fantastic professionals, and the idea of working tightly with programs and helping them understand what's working, what's not working about their programs, bringing that out into light and helping the warfighter get the tools they need, the weapons that work, is what we're all about. And we're happy to partner with programs in order to make that happen. So I inherited several different equities in this program, in this position. First of all, my immediate predecessor, Bob Beeler, did a nice job of bringing a different light to DOT&E, one of cooperation. And also he left behind a good science and technology plan that I was able to build off of and create an updated strategy for the organization. Now, we're always going to be the warfighter's unbiased advocate, but we're also happy to work with programs to help them identify the problems and make sure they're at least aware of what the limitations are when they field products. Because, you know, we're not, the only thing we field are reports. But I do have authorities associated with test plans and acquisition milestones, which is part of the fun of the job. All right, so in order to craft this updated strategy, I needed to hook it to the National Defense Strategy. It's based on 4 defense-level priorities: defending the homeland with growing multi-domain challenges, especially the ones by our pacing threat, China, not be too far behind our concerns with Russia. Deterring strategic attacks, of course, we don't need to talk about that too much here, but deterring aggression while being prepared to prevail in conflict when necessary. That is the core of what we have to do. And then building a resilient joint force and defense ecosystem, which I think is a big reason why we're here talking today. The Secretary, and when I say the Secretary, I'm a defense guy, so it's the Defense Secretary, has 3 approaches to bringing this National Defense Strategy to fruition. Integrated deterrence, kind of working across the joint force; campaigning, which I'm taking advantage of when it comes to implementing this strategy; and building enduring advantages across the DoD enterprise. He also talks about not just, you know, what do we have and what are we doing in order to pace the threat, but he also talks about what do we do to create discomfort in the minds and hearts of our potential opponents, which that's always been my sweet spot, right? How do we take advantage of technologies and advance them into the field? So with that lens then, I'm going to pull apart some of these 3 things. Integrated deterrence, that's integration across the joint force, but also how we integrate with our allies and partners. Campaigning, so how do we tease out through activities and experimentation the things we need to be able to do better, and that will be the linchpin by the way this strategy comes together. And then that enduring advantage for the future of the joint force that hits the heart of this conference, I think. Accelerating force development and fielding technology faster through innovation and investment in a robust R&D portfolio. I don't work the S&T side of business so much. I'm more of a kind of a full-strength production guy. The vice chairman is especially interested in cyber, IA, hypersonics, and enhancing interoperability. Again, interoperability is hard enough within a single service, but now we have to do interoperability across the joint force and then extend that to our allies and partners. It's a challenging environment. I have a thought experiment for you in a little bit. So now with all that top-level, DoD-level strategic guidance, let me talk about the drivers for the DOT&E strategy. So we are the key to weapons that work. It's right in our logo. But we need to do that at the speed of need. We, DOT&E, need to be a part of delivering weapon systems at the speed of need. So that is a part of the leadership that I'm bringing to the organization. Not that they aren't already interested in it, but we're going to add some additional focus. So that informs our actions. Go speed to field. Earlier, more frequent, faster T&E in operationally representative products to find problems and provide feedback, not only to the system developers, but also identify performance shortfalls for the operators. Because we oftentimes are focused on things that are getting close to the end of their product development cycle, that is production representative. But we're also, struggling with what production representative means in an environment where we're dominated by software-reliant products. What does production mean? Build, right? So it's a different problem set, and we're trying to apply ourselves to it differently. So through that, we characterize earlier involvement in the operational side of test and evaluation as shift left. So let's park that thought, shift left. We need to get our hands on data. We need to understand it. We need to groom it. We need to apply new tools so that we can take better advantage of it. Curating and management of data is hard, but that must be confronted. Also, we have a whole different effort right now thinking about how to structure data associated with operational test and evaluation so that we could take better advantage of it over the long term. You go back and look at some of our earlier reporting on operational test and evaluation, and they're all documents, right? They're unharvestable. So how do I make sure that my predecessors benefit from our current efforts? And that's one of the things we're working on. So that pulls into the idea of, hey, operational test and evaluation. What's our play in responsible use of artificial intelligence and machine learning? All right, so engineering of software-reliant systems. I mean, isn't everything software-reliant in some fashion or another? Okay, maybe bullets, right? But even some of them have software in them. So we need to be thinking about how do we, OT&E, work with systems that are built to change over time? And are they built to change over time? When I was involved in the Defense Innovation Board Software Acquisition Practices Study, if you read that report, it's right on the cover. Software is never done. So what does that mean to operational test and evaluation, where we've been primarily focused in the past on production representative? Well, if production is something that's evolving, how do we get engaged in that game as a principal driver for how we came through this strategy? Then, but is the product built to change over time? Is it artfully crafted from an architecture perspective to evolve gracefully? Well, that hasn't been something we've really been very focused on in the past. We haven't been, thoughtfully considering architecture when it comes to operational test and evaluation. But when it comes to products that are built to change over time, maybe that's something we should at least be able to have an intelligent conversation on with regard to things like digital thread and digital twins and those kinds of things. Are you set up for the future? When we stop taking a look at it from the OT&E lens, and as you continue to evolve, how comfortable are we that this is going to continue to represent the best interests of the warfighter? That's look right. Shift left, get involved early, collect data, take advantage where we can, give credit where credit is due, not give credit if it's not ready for prime time, but also think about where we're going and look right. That also applies to the application of machine learning and artificial intelligence and the responsible use of that when it comes to how that gets wired into products and how they're going to evolve over time, because they're going to behave differently after we turn them loose into the wild. And where do we understand where those boundaries are between what we expect it to do, what we expect it to learn, and where it's gone too far? How do we establish those fences? All right, so all of this happens through people. Culture is always a challenge when it comes to organizational transformation, but culture follows behavior. So one of the things we're doing as a part of this strategy is wirings in different modes of operation for our people to help shift their behaviors to change over time and eventually have an impact to culture. Looking for innovative test and evaluation is also about the tactics, techniques, and procedures we use in the operational test community. What are our tools? And we could really use some help from industry and academia to better understand how we do our business better into the future. To establish those positive patterns of early and often data sharing for mutual benefit. And that's going to be something that, we're probably not warmly welcome to the early stage of product development timeline, right? What are you OT&E guys doing here? well, you know, we have some equities in the early stages of the product development life cycle, and we're going to start to invite ourselves in places where we might not have been in the past. But, you know, we're here to help, really. We'll call balls and strikes, nothing personal, just business. Part of our shift left, and if we look right, we don't see what we don't like what we're looking at, we're going to tell you about it. But, you know, sometimes good medicine doesn't always taste good. We don't have to be mean about it, at least anyway. It's definitely something I have going for me. Because I'm a nice guy mostly, right? Those of you who know me, right? By the way, I'm very happy to see a bunch of people that I've known from the past. Thanks very much for reaching out and shaking hands, and hopefully I'll see a few more of you on the way out. And stick around for Jimmy's talk, too. It's going to be great. Hopefully the place won't empty out quite as much as when the Admiral finished. Yeah. Buckle up. All right, so the overarching driver is instituting an enterprise mindset, right? I'm a DoD guy now, so I'm working across and looking across the rest of the Defense Department. So how do we collaborate across the community and pull in those lessons learned and share them with others? How do we thoughtfully examine our traditional boundaries of contractor development, development test, and operational test? It's never really been layered out like that, and perhaps shouldn't be ensconced in organizational wiring diagrams, because it's a set of Venn diagrams. And when you look at software-reliant systems, it's a continuous cycle. So we need to make sure we're also breaking down those artificial organizational architectures. Allies and partners, right? I parked on that for a second earlier. So you look across the world, at the risk of getting into current events, think about where China and Russia are right now. They go it alone, right? It's my way or the highway. It's not the way we roll. We work with other countries. We are a part of robust collaborative partnerships, and that's where we really shine. But that means we also need to operate that way in our military engagements, which you think about the way we do interoperability across the joint force, well, that's hard enough. It's even hard enough to do interoperability within a service. Expand that out and then go allies and partners. We need some different ways of approaching that problem, and hopefully operational test and evaluation community will be a part of that transformation as well. So let's get into the strategic pillars, excuse me, the pillars rather, of this updated strategy. There are 6 drivers. Test the way we fight. That's always been a core equity of my organization and how we've done business in the past. We need to think about that a little bit differently because, as I said earlier, weapon systems that change over time, joint war fighting. Well, how do we do that, right? So one of the things we're working on right now is thinking about validated mission threads in order to weave together the system of systems that are going to be a part of executing a mission, and looking at operational test and evaluation through that lens. But we test systems at a time, right? There are acquisition programs, they have a test and evaluation master plan, and we work through that. But we need to do that more and more through the lens of multi-domain operations, system of systems, allies and partners. Scalable, adaptive representations of that environment, which is hard, right? We talked earlier about modeling and simulation. I'm all over that, right? But it has to represent the actual physics of the problem and be validated and verified that it will be operationally representative of the real world if we're counting on it for a score when it comes to operational test. That means that it's not cheap or easy. Probably less expensive than a full physical laydown, but that's not a time to go cheap when it comes to good modeling and simulation with validated, verified, and accredited outcomes. All right, accelerate delivery of weapons that work. So my team needs to be much more involved in the digital thread. We have right now some work going on thinking about, well, what does a digital temp look like? Well, it's a document right now. You print it out and you just get out a pen, you start marking it up. But we have some active research going on in what does a digital temp look like, and how do we structure that and provide that as guidance to the rest of the development community. And then T&E integrated into model-based engineering. How do we take advantage of the connections through the digital thread and use that for our work? Survivability in non-permissive environments. Well, that's something we've always done. But with a twist now, we're characterizing survivability in some interesting ways. Like, for instance, what does cyber survivability look like? Well, I don't care how much money you spent on your thing, billions maybe, but if it shows up to the fight and you get pwned as soon as you show up, then you just wasted all your money. Cyber survivable is a first-order business. Well, what does that mean? Well, if it's a product that is going to be evolving over time, then how do you keep it fresh, right? How do you put defense into cyber defense? Is that people? Is it automation? A mix of both? You need to decide. It's your program, but we're going to be looking out for cyber survivability as something that we need to make sure gets built into our weapon systems as part of normal everyday life. Unfortunately, that hasn't been a part of everyday life. I'm somewhat guilty of this, having been in the product development community, trying to squeeze every last dollar into product performance. Infrastructure and IA, we'll get to it. I got my ATO, I should be good. Well, I'm here to tell you that having an authority to operate does not mean you're cyber survivable. We sick our red teams on these programs and we find password flat files buried in the system, systems that are maybe been up to date in terms of getting all of their IAVAs and all that stuff in there, but hackable, right? Just because you've got it updated doesn't mean you've actually bolted it down. So we're going to be much more insistent upon that, because if you look through last fiscal year's annual report, which I signed out like a week after I showed up to the job, page after page of not survivable, not survivable, not survivable. Why? Cyber. We have got to get our hands around that, because the Chinese are good at this. They're omnipresent, state-sponsored, deep. We've got to be better. T&E of weapon systems built to change over time. As I said, look right. Let's think about that early on before it's too late. It's another thing we have to do right about cyber survivability. That has to be first-order business in the system architecture. But we can help understand how the product is coming together, look for places where things are maturing to the point where we can take credit for score earlier in the life cycle, so that we find those problems in that time and place where it's a lot easier and less expensive to fix. So many studies. I just, like Don said, from my last job at the Software Engineering Institute, so many studies about products that get all the way to the end and they're ready to smash a champagne bottle on it virtually and say, yep, we're done. And then you go through there and look and see how many bugs are in the system. And it's just so deep and so hard to work through all that technical debt that you end up throwing your hands up and saying, we're going to field it anyway. It's going to go with this big, thick binder full of workarounds. Whew, we've got to find a better way to do business. Find the problems early where it's easier and less expensive to fix. Shift left. So that also has an impact on our people. So I have a team of phenomenal experts in operational tests. They're fairly senior in terms of their time in both in civilian and military careers, as well as the folks that do a lot of my analysis work for me. Most of my analysis work is done by an FFRDC called IDA, and they're fantastic, deep experts. But they need to learn some new behaviors that will help understand how we do this work in a different way. So we have an implementation plan, still in the works. We're trying to figure out how do we measure these 5 elements, right? And I'm just going to kind of go through them again, just so we're all kind of test the way we fight, accelerate the weapons, the delivery of weapons at work, improve survivability. Weapon systems are built to change over time, and how do we do operational T&E for that, and improving the skill set and resources of our people. So We're building an implementation plan that tries to measure some of those attributes so that we can show that we're making progress over time. I've briefed out this strategy to the secretary, the deputy secretary. I meet regularly with the undersecretaries for acquisition and sustainment and research and engineering. We have lunch. It's nice. They're tracking, and their team has provided inputs to this strategy and are helping us with crafting this implementation plan. My team briefs congressional staff regularly. I occasionally meet with House and Senate members. By the way, did you guys get a chance to hear Representative Lenjamin yesterday? What a great guy, right? Well, I mean, he's retiring. He's a fantastic resource for the department. I hope he finds kind of like something to do in his afterlife that can help us keep that laser focus on cyber survivability. He's been a great asset, especially to the DOT&E community. And so as we talk, my team to the staff and me to members, we keep this drumbeat of we need to do this business differently. They've been very helpful in terms of the authorities and resources we have to do our work. But I'm hoping that you can help too. And that's, first of all, any opportunity to come to Newport in the summer is a good one, but I'm happy to also have your thoughts, feelings, and feedback. This new strategy is published on the DOT&E website, pretty easy to find, DOT&E strategy into Google, it'll pop right up. Actually, somebody experiment with that for me and tell me if that's actually true. I want to know if you actually do DOT&E and then space strategy, if it actually pops up or not. Yeah, operational test right here and now. Okay, so test and evaluation is a team sport, and we want to be a part of a broad team. We just don't want to hand down edicts and make people feel bad. Sometimes we call the strikes, but we want to call the balls too, and give credit where it's due, but also point out where things aren't where they need to be. And sorry, again, that's just the nature of the business, but we don't have to be mean about it. So I did want to talk a little bit about, how am I doing on time, by the way? 15 minutes? Okay. So my team gave me some thoughts about how autonomous undersea systems play into the work we do on DOT&E. So I've got 5 pieces of the organization: land warfare, air warfare, missile defense and net-centric, naval warfare. Chris Henry, for those of you who know him, is my SES there, my deputy director. And I have a 5th part, which is my strategic initiatives and evolving technologies. So that's my rising tide that raises all boats, and Dr. Sandra Hobson has been my point person for helping pull this strategy together, and she's been fantastic to work with. Actually, they all have been. That's another part of an equity that I inherited coming into this job, is a great senior leadership team and a fantastic set of folks underneath them. Can't say enough positive about them, but none fewer than my principal deputy, Ray O'Toole, some of which you may know. He is a great asset, a fantastic right-hand man. Anyway, so I talked a little bit earlier about modeling and simulation is a valuable tool, and there's a couple of different places we're seeing this. Undersea warfare certainly is a complicated environment, very tough. Different kinds of bottoms, different kinds of ocean environments. Modeling that accurately to the point where it's useful and a representative of the real physical world is non-trivial. But once you get it, you can use it a bunch of different times for a bunch of different products. It's just as long as they fit the use case, validated, verified, and accredited for the use. By the way, this is not the only place we're seeing this. Think about the saga of F-35, which fortunately most of which has played out before I got there. But we have we needed to make sure that the aircraft is seeing the kinds of problems that will face it when it gets to the pointy end of the spear. We had to go out and acquire some different kinds of emulators and radars, but you know what? We can't afford the number of emulators and radars and things like that they will see in the operational environment, so we're going to be relying very heavily on modeling and simulation through something called the Joint Simulation Environment. that was a horrible knothole to be pulled through. Fortunately, mostly done before I got there. But we're nearing the end, and it's just another example of the hard work that it takes to really do modeling and simulation and validation and verification. But we're going to be able to use the JSC for other kinds of aircraft. So there's going to be a fantastic opportunity for enterprise-wide reuse. And so some of the work that's been done here with this community, and like the ECWAF and others, where it's been around for a long time and hasn't been the easiest thing to do, but it shouldn't be because it's hard. So we should make sure that our senior leaders, people in my shoes, that you bring that strong message to them that just because we say we're going to do modeling and simulation doesn't mean it's going to be cheap or easy or it's going to happen right away. Right? Math is hard. All right. I think I'm getting close enough to the end now where I'm going to shift gears and call for questions. All right, Dennis is bringing the hurt.
Is this working? Is this on? Well, welcome back to Newport, sir. Good to see you again. I've got a question that's tangential to your current job, but something that I know you've worked on for a long, long time. For over 20 years, you were a crusader for open systems, particularly with software, open systems architecture, software repositories, and we've made great progress over the last 20 years. But I'm just wondering where you think we are, the Department of Defense is, when it comes to open systems, and has the paradigm for build once, use many, has that changed somewhat given things like auto code generation, the need to always change for cyber, and low code, no code sort of usage of systems? So just wondering what your thoughts are.
And you bring me down, man. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, right? But I will say that in some of the, honestly, one of the big surprises in that initiative was under Better Buying Power, when Ashton Carter was the acquisition executive, and then later on Frank Hendel, I had an opportunity to kind of get open architecture out of the Navy and spread it across the other services. And one of the things that we ended up gravitating to was contract guidance. What's a systems engineer doing writing contract guidance? But I saw the light on that. If you get it into the contract and you make it a part of how industry responds to solicitations, then you'll get it. And actually, that's worked out. Billions of dollars of contract award value with open architecture laced all the way through it. One of the things we haven't quite gotten yet, though, is enterprise thought work when it comes to how we acquire our systems. I was talking to this one, on the other problem we have is that we have all of these classification boundaries in between programs. So I was talking to this one program, I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but it was one of those kind of programs where one guy working on one problem, another guy working on the exact same problem, could not talk to each other. They also, I knew about a technical standard, Future Airborne Capability Environment. Phenomenal technical standard. It took a dozen years to put it together. Consortium of over 100 different companies, big and small. Neither one of them could use it because they were all sapped up and they could only invite a certain number of players into the field. Having a consortium with 100 members? There's just no way to get there from here. But you're going to reinvent all that stuff anyway? It just hurts my head. Right? So we've made lots of progress, but we still acquire systems program at a time, and we don't think about how we spend our money as an enterprise. We protect the program. So we still have a long ways to go. All right, come on. Somebody's got to have something else.
Hey, thank you for coming and talk. And I particularly liked what's production representative. And so we're acquiring systems very differently. We talk about DevSecOps, and certainly we can't continue down the path, like continuous integration, continuous development. It's changing the way we do business. We can't leave DOT any out of it. And so you mentioned you're working on what a digital temp might look like, and even if we still call it a temp, because I would think that we're going to be delivering to you digital products that, we're not going to deliver a system and say, is it operationally, ready to go. We're going to be delivering you a whole mass of digital products, so you've checked off 3/4 of that, quote, digital temp. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the challenges in the digital temp so that we can make sure that as we're, again, changing the way we're acquiring systems, this is a very significant change in the way we're doing business, certainly through the development phases, but how do we make sure we bring DOT&E in so you're already 3/4 of the way there by the time we reach that
Thank
stage.
you. Great question. So I'll say that use case is important. And a lot of our weapon systems and supporting products are software reliant in some fashion or another. But what does frequent delivery of capability mean? I think it's different depending on context. Like heavyweight torpedoes, for instance. We're going to deliver new capability annually, maybe pretty fast compared to the way we used to deliver. When I was on the early, I was on the kind of like the plank holder, if you will, for the acoustic rapid COTS insertion, and at the time, annual delivery of software was ridiculous. Nobody could pull that off, but we pulled it off for so long, the fleet told us to slow down. Put that on my tombstone. But is biannual really? It's 2022? That's the business model? Oh, come on. So I think we need to think about use case and what frequent delivery means, and I think we'll see that it's different depending on the product type. Some things are just pure up digital, operator intensive, taking advantage of algorithms and not tied to physical things so much, and those should be like, the updates I'm getting like 3 times a day on my Amazon app in my phone. So with that as one end and weapons at the other, I think there's room for what frequent means in between those bookends. We need to think about what is responsibly fast depending on the product type. Sir.
Good morning, sir. Steve Crotchlow with Defense Trade Solutions. Thank you for your remarks this morning. Couple of topics that you addressed regarding cybersecurity and moving things to the left as much as possible. Just last week, I was at the Anti-Tamper Conference in Laurel, Maryland, and I'm just curious to get your thoughts and in an unclassified environment about the Anti-Tamper Executive Agency and kind of balancing interoperability with the concerns and the issues of anti-tamper.
So I'm gonna struggle a little bit. I'm not exactly a big expert in anti-tamper, except to say that that's a part of the infrastructure for fielding systems. We need to make sure it gets designed in an early stage of product development lifecycle. But then another part, and I parked on it earlier, is about what does cyber defense mean, and when it comes to how do we make sure, if systems get exploited, or at least people attempt to exploit them, that they are not successful to the extent that it harms the warfighter. We were doing a test recently on an Army product where I had asked the teams, like, what happens if, I don't know, the soldier wearing that gets hurt or, God help us, killed, right? And somebody picks that thing up. How are we going to make sure that if it's still turned on, that it's no longer useful? I've seen too many action movies, right, where somebody like chops somebody's thumb off or gouges out their eyeball, right? So, but that's a real thing, right? So we need to be thinking about, our products as they get put out into the field and get used, and perhaps how do we keep them from getting exploited? And honestly, that is a upfront design problem. It needs to be built in from the front, because you can't anti-tamper a product after it's been built. All right, I'm feeling the end. We'll take one more if anybody's really juicy about it. All right. Oh, here we go.
You talked about moving into the left, right? Looking right. Do you see any tools like automated testing, virtualization that are going to help you with all of this stuff? Because what you just talked about is looking at a lot of things that you have to look at. Either requires a lot of people or requires technology.
So I know that it's a long road. So the question for those of you who didn't hear it is that, look right, sounds great. How are you going to do that, right? You've never done that before. You don't have the people, you don't have the process, you don't have the tools, you don't have the relationships. How are you going to pull that off? Carefully and perhaps slowly, right? I mean, these kinds of transformations, it's one of the things I learned from my experience on doing open architecture at the naval and then defense level, is that the thing that it takes more than anything else to change a big organization, of any big organization, but the DoD is a pretty big organization, is dogmatic determination and sticking with it. So first of all, establishing the strategy, putting the patterns in place, and sticking with it. It's going to be it's a long-term investment and thought work, and it will also require some different tools and techniques. Okay? Thank you.
I'll give you the challenge coin. Okay. Takes two, I guess. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't know about the rest of you. I feel pretty comfortable with Mr. Guertin in this position. He's got a common sense approach. He has the background to figure out a lot of these things. So look forward to supporting you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Do I get that?